I thought I had found my dream job. 28 years old, fresh out of graduate school with my marketing degree, and there I was walking into the gleaming offices of Sterling Communications on my first day. The coffee smelled like possibility, the morning light streamed through floor to ceiling windows, and everyone seemed so welcoming. Especially Sarah, the woman who sat at the desk next to mine. She had this warm smile and immediately offered to show me around, introduce me to everyone, help me settle in. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have found not just a great company, but what felt like a genuine friend. Little did I know that this same person would soon teach me one of life's harshest lessons about trust and betrayal. Before we dive into what happened next, I would love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, and do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories that matter. Trust me, what unfolds next will make you question everything you think you know about workplace friendships. Those first few weeks at Sterling Communications felt like a dream come true. I had landed a position as a junior marketing strategist, and the creative energy in that office was absolutely electric. Everyone seemed passionate about their work, collaborating on campaigns for major brands, brainstorming in conference rooms with walls covered in colorful post-it notes and inspiration boards. Sarah Martinez became my unofficial mentor and closest friend at work. She was 32, had been with the company for 4 years, and knew everyone and everything about how Sterling operated. Sarah had this infectious laugh and would always check in on me, asking how I was adjusting if I needed help with anything. We started grabbing lunch together almost every day at this little sandwich shop around the corner, talking about everything from campaign strategies to our weekend plans. What I appreciated most about Sarah was how generous she seemed with her knowledge. When I struggled with understanding the company's client management system, she spent her own break time walking me through it. When I felt overwhelmed by my first big project presentation, she offered to review my slides and give feedback. I felt so grateful to have someone looking out for me in what could have been an intimidating environment for a newcomer. About 6 weeks into my time at Sterling, our department head Michael Rodriguez announced that the company had secured a huge contract with EcoNature, a sustainable home products company looking to completely rebrand and launch a national campaign. This was the kind of project that could make careers, he explained, and he was looking for fresh ideas from the entire team. I remember the excitement I felt hearing about this opportunity. Sustainability was something I was genuinely passionate about, and I had written my graduate thesis on how environmental messaging could drive consumer behavior. I immediately started brainstorming ideas, staying late at the office, researching EcoNature's target demographics, studying their competitors, analyzing market trends. The concept that emerged from my research was something I called the Everyday Heroes campaign. The idea was to showcase real families making small sustainable changes in their daily lives and demonstrating how EcoNature's products fit seamlessly into these authentic moments. Instead of preaching about environmental responsibility, we would tell stories about parents packing eco-friendly lunchboxes, college students furnishing their dorms with sustainable products, grandparents teaching their grandchildren about taking care of the planet. I was so excited about this concept that I could barely sleep. I spent an entire weekend creating a detailed presentation with mood boards, sample social media content, potential partnerships with environmental influencers, and even rough budget estimates. I researched everything from filming locations to casting directors who specialized in authentic, diverse families. The more I developed this idea, the more convinced I became that it could be truly special. It felt different from the typical environmental campaigns that often made people feel guilty or inadequate. This would celebrate the small choices people were already making and inspire others to join in positioning EcoNature as a brand that understood real life. On Monday morning, I could hardly contain my enthusiasm as I walked into the office. I had scheduled a meeting with Sarah to get her thoughts before presenting to Michael and the senior team later that week. Sarah and I had developed this routine where we would bounce ideas off each other, and her feedback had always been incredibly helpful. We met in one of the smaller conference rooms, and I launched into my presentation with all the energy and passion I felt for the concept. I showed Sarah my mood boards, explained the messaging strategy, walked her through the social media approach, and detailed how we could measure success through engagement metrics and sales data. Sarah's response seemed enthusiastic. She asked thoughtful questions about budget allocation, wondered about potential challenges with filming authentic family moments, and suggested a few tweaks to the social media strategy that actually made a lot of sense. We spent almost an hour going through every detail, and by the end of our meeting, I felt even more confident about the campaign. "This is really solid work, Clara," Sarah said as I packed up my materials. You have something special here. The authentic family angle is brilliant, and the way you have thought through the implementation is impressive. I left that meeting feeling on top of the world. Having someone with Sarah's experience validate my concept gave me the confidence boost I needed. I spent the next 2 days refining my presentation, incorporating some of Sarah's suggestions, and preparing for what I hoped would be a career-defining moment. The morning of my presentation to Michael and the senior team, I arrived at the office early to make final adjustments to my slides. I had practiced my pitch at home until I knew every transition, every key point, every compelling statistic by heart. This was my moment to prove that I deserved to be at Sterling Communications, that I could contribute something meaningful to the team. But when I got to my desk, there was an email waiting that made my stomach drop. Michael had sent a message to the entire marketing department, announcing that the EcoNature campaign presentation had been moved up and would now take place in 30 minutes. I quickly gathered my materials and headed toward the main conference room, my heart racing with nervous excitement. As I approached the room, I could hear voices inside. The door was slightly open, and I was about to enter when I heard Sarah's voice clearly presenting ideas that sounded remarkably familiar. I stopped in my tracks, pressing myself against the wall beside the doorway. The concept I am proposing is called Everyday Heroes. Sarah was saying, her voice confident and clear. Instead of lecturing consumers about environmental responsibility, we showcase real families integrating sustainable practices into their authentic daily lives. My hands started shaking as I listened to her continue describing my campaign using almost the exact words I had shared with her just 3 days earlier. She talked about the mood boards, the social media strategy, the influencer partnerships, even the specific budget breakdowns I had researched and calculated. I stood frozen in that hallway, unable to process what I was hearing. This was my idea, my research, my passion project that I had poured weeks of work into. Yet there was Sarah presenting it to the senior team as if it had sprung fully formed from her own creativity. The worst part was how naturally she delivered it, how she answered questions with details that I had discovered through my own research. When Michael asked about target demographics, Sarah quoted statistics I had found. When the creative director wondered about potential filming challenges, Sarah raised concerns I had discussed with her during our meeting. I finally found the courage to enter the room, slipping in quietly and taking a seat near the back. Sarah glanced at me briefly, and for just a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt maybe, or fear of being caught, but she quickly returned her attention to the presentation, finishing strong with a timeline and next steps that mirrored exactly what I had planned to propose. The room erupted in praise when Sarah finished. Michael called the campaign innovative and authentic. The creative director said it was exactly the kind of fresh thinking Sterling needed. The account manager predicted it would be a huge success with the EcoNature team. Sarah beamed under the praise, graciously accepting congratulations and answering follow-up questions, as if she had been developing this concept for months. When Michael asked if anyone else had ideas to present, I felt my throat close up completely. How could I now present my own work after watching someone else claim credit for it? I mumbled something about still developing my concept and quickly left the room. I made it to the bathroom before the tears started, locking myself in a stall and trying to process the betrayal I had just witnessed. This person I had trusted, who had mentored me and supported me, had stolen my work and presented it as her own. The rest of that day passed in a blur of confusion and hurt. I could not concentrate on anything else, replaying the meeting over and over in my mind, wondering if I had somehow misunderstood what happened. But there was no mistaking it. Sarah had taken my campaign concept, my research, my passion, and claimed it for herself. When she stopped by my desk later that afternoon, acting as if nothing had happened, asking how my day was going, I could barely look at her. She even had the audacity to mention that she was excited about her EcoNature presentation and how well it had been received. That evening, I went home and pulled out all my original notes, my research documents, my first drafts, and mood boards. Everything was time-stamped and dated, clear evidence that I had developed this campaign concept weeks before presenting it to Sarah. I had documentation of every step of my creative process, every late night spent perfecting the strategy. But what was I supposed to do with this evidence? Accuse a more senior colleague of theft challenge, someone who had been with the company for 4 years and clearly had the trust and respect of management? I was the new person still in my probationary period with no established relationships or credibility. I spent that entire night staring at the ceiling, feeling hurt and angry and completely powerless. I had worked so hard to create something meaningful, and in a single presentation, Sarah had taken it all away from me. The days following Sarah's presentation were torture. I watched as she basked in the praise and recognition that should have been mine, participating in planning meetings for her campaign, being congratulated by colleagues throughout the office. Michael even mentioned in our weekly team meeting how impressed he was with Sarah's innovative thinking and strategic approach. What made it even worse was how Sarah continued to act toward me. She maintained the same friendly mentoring facade, still asking about my projects, still suggesting we grab lunch together. It was as if she genuinely believed she had done nothing wrong, or maybe she was just that skilled at compartmentalizing her betrayal. I found myself studying her behavior, looking for any sign of guilt or remorse. Sometimes I thought I caught glimpses of discomfort when our eyes met, but she always quickly shifted back to her normal, warm demeanor. She even had the nerve to offer encouragement about my future project ideas, telling me she was sure I would come up with something great for the next client opportunity. About 2 weeks after the presentation, Michael called me into his office for what he described as a routine check-in. He asked how I was settling in, what I thought of the team dynamics, and whether I felt I was getting enough opportunities to contribute. It was the perfect opening to mention what had happened with the Eco-Nature campaign, but I found myself frozen again. How could I explain that my mentor had stolen my work without sounding like I was making excuses or being a sore loser? Michael clearly held Sarah in high regard, and I was still the newcomer trying to prove myself. I ended up giving generic positive responses about enjoying the collaborative environment and looking forward to contributing more. As I left Michael's office, I felt like a coward. I had let the opportunity slip away, and with each passing day, it would become harder to bring up the stolen campaign. Sarah's version was already moving forward, with client meetings scheduled and production timelines being established. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during a conversation with Jake, one of the graphic designers who had been with Sterling for about 2 years. We were both working late one evening, and he mentioned how impressed he had been with Sarah's campaign concept. "The whole authentic families angle was brilliant," Jake said. "It reminded me of some research you were doing a few weeks ago about environmental messaging and consumer behavior. You were so passionate about that topic." Something in his tone suggested he had connected some dots, and I decided to take a risk. I told Jake the entire story about developing the campaign concept, sharing it with Sarah, and then watching her present it as her own work. Jake listened without judgment, asking careful questions about timelines and details. "I wondered about that," he said quietly. "Sarah is talented, but that presentation felt different from her usual style, more research-heavy, more academic in its approach. Plus, I remembered your graduate thesis topic from when you introduced yourself to the team." Knowing that someone else had noticed the inconsistency was validating, but it also made the situation more complicated. Jake encouraged me to document everything and consider speaking with Michael, but he also warned me about the politics involved in challenging a senior colleague. Over the next few days, I carefully compiled all my evidence. I had email timestamps showing when I had requested access to research databases. I had saved versions of my mood boards with creation dates. I had notes from my initial brainstorming sessions, including sketches and ideas that had not made it into the final presentation. Most importantly, I had text messages I had sent to my best friend from graduate school describing my excitement about the campaign concept and asking for feedback on specific elements. These messages were sent 2 days before my meeting with Sarah, providing clear evidence of when I had developed the ideas. The more evidence I gathered, the more confident I became that I could prove my case. But I also realized that having proof was only half the battle. I needed to be strategic about how I presented this information and what outcome I was hoping to achieve. I did not want to destroy Sarah's career or create ongoing drama in the office. I just wanted credit for my work and the opportunity to be involved in implementing the campaign I had created. Most importantly, I wanted to ensure that this kind of theft could not happen again, either to me or to other junior employees who might be vulnerable to similar exploitation. After much deliberation, I decided to request a private meeting with Michael. I spent hours preparing for this conversation, anticipating every possible question or objection. I practiced explaining the situation calmly and professionally, focusing on facts rather than emotions. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. I knew this conversation could change everything about my experience at Sterling Communications. I was either about to stand up for myself and gain respect, or I was about to be labeled as a troublemaker and face potential retaliation. I scheduled the meeting with Michael for first thing Monday morning, before the office got busy and there was less chance of interruption. As I sat in his office, my carefully organized evidence folder in my lap, I took a deep breath and began explaining what had happened with the Eco Nature campaign. I presented the timeline methodically, showing Michael the documentation of my research process, the timestamps on my files, and the text messages proving when I had developed the concept. I kept my tone professional and factual, avoiding any emotional language or personal attacks on Sarah. Michael listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification or requesting to see specific pieces of evidence. I could not read his expression as he reviewed my materials, and the silence stretched uncomfortably between my explanations. "These are serious allegations, Clara," Michael said finally. "I need to understand why you did not bring this to my attention immediately after Sarah's presentation." I explained my concerns about being new to the company, my uncertainty about how such a situation should be handled, and my initial hope that maybe there had been some kind of misunderstanding. Michael nodded, seeming to understand the difficult position I had been in. "I am going to need to speak with Sarah about this," Michael continued. "Can you give me some time to investigate, and then we will schedule a follow-up meeting?" The next few days were excruciating. I tried to act normally around Sarah, but every interaction felt loaded with tension. She seemed to sense that something had changed, asking if I was feeling okay and whether anything was bothering me. I managed to deflect these questions, but I could tell she was becoming suspicious. 3 days later, Michael called me back into his office. This time, Sarah was there too, sitting in one of the chairs across from his desk. My stomach immediately knotted with anxiety. "I have reviewed Clara's documentation," Michael began, "and I have some questions about the development of the Eco Nature campaign concept." Sarah's face remained composed, but I noticed her hands clenched slightly in her lap. Michael walked through the timeline I had presented, asking Sarah to explain her own creative process and when she had developed various elements of the campaign. Sarah's responses became increasingly vague and defensive. She talked about having had general ideas about authentic family messaging for a while, but could not provide any documentation or specific examples of when these ideas had emerged. When Michael asked about the detailed research components, she claimed to have done background reading, but could not cite any specific sources. The turning point came when Michael asked Sarah about a particular statistic she had used in her presentation, one that I had found in an obscure academic study and included in my materials. Sarah hesitated, then admitted she could not remember where she had encountered that information. "I have that source clearly documented in my research notes," I said quietly, and Michael nodded. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Sarah's explanations becoming increasingly unconvincing. Finally, Michael asked to speak with each of us privately, starting with Sarah. I waited in the lobby outside Michael's office, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. After about 15 minutes, Sarah emerged looking pale and shaken. She avoided eye contact with me completely as she walked quickly back toward her desk. Michael called me back in and closed the door behind us. "Based on my investigation," he said, "it is clear that you developed the Everyday Heroes campaign concept and that Sarah inappropriately presented your work as her own. This is a serious violation of company policy and professional ethics." I felt a rush of relief and validation, but also anxiety about what would happen next. Michael explained that Sarah would be removed from the Eco Nature project immediately and would face formal disciplinary action. More importantly for me, I would be taking over as the lead strategist for the campaign, with full credit for the concept and a significant increase in my project responsibilities. "I want to apologize," Michael continued, "for not creating an environment where you felt comfortable bringing this issue to me immediately. We clearly need to do better at supporting junior employees and ensuring they know how to report concerns about intellectual property theft." The conversation concluded with Michael outlining next steps for the Eco Nature campaign and promising to schedule a team meeting where my role as the creative lead would be announced. He also mentioned that this incident would be documented in Sarah's personnel file and that the company would be implementing new protocols to prevent similar situations. As I left Michael's office, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was certainly satisfaction in having my work recognized and credited properly, but there was also sadness about the loss of what I had thought was a genuine friendship. The mentoring relationship I had valued so much had been revealed as manipulation and exploitation. Sarah cleared out her desk that afternoon and left Sterling Communications by the end of the week. She never spoke to me again after that final meeting in Michael's office, avoiding me completely during her remaining days at the company. The Eco Nature campaign launched 6 months later and exceeded all performance expectations. The authentic family stories resonated powerfully with consumers. The social media engagement rates were remarkable, and the client was so pleased that they extended Sterling's contract for an additional 2 years. But the real victory was not just professional recognition. Standing up for myself in that situation taught me invaluable lessons about self advocacy, the importance of documentation, and the courage required to speak truth to power even when it feels risky. The experience also led to meaningful changes at Sterling Communications. Michael worked with human resources to establish clear protocols for reporting intellectual property concerns, created mentorship guidelines that included specific ethical standards, and implemented regular check ins with junior employees to ensure they felt supported and heard. I realized that my initial betrayal had created an opportunity not just for personal growth, but for positive organizational change that would protect other employees from similar exploitation. Sometimes standing up for yourself creates ripples that extend far beyond your individual situation. In the months that followed, I built genuine mentoring relationships with colleagues who demonstrated integrity and authenticity. I learned to trust again, but more wisely, and I committed to being the kind of mentor to future junior employees that I had wished Sarah could have been to me. The pain of betrayal eventually faded, replaced by confidence in my own abilities and pride in having handled a difficult situation with professionalism and persistence. What could have been a career ending disappointment became instead a foundation for long term success and personal growth. Now, several years later, I look back on that experience as a turning point that taught me essential skills I continue to use in every professional relationship and challenging situation I encounter. What I learned is that integrity is not just about our own actions, but about having the courage to stand up when we witness violations of trust and fairness. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight for ourselves, but they often turn out to be the most important ones for our long term growth and self respect. As I wrap up this story, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a workplace situation where someone tried to take credit for your work? How did you handle it, and what advice would you give to someone facing a similar challenge? Share your experiences in the comments below, because these conversations help all of us learn and grow stronger together. Please hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and make sure to subscribe for more real-life stories about navigating workplace challenges, building resilience, and finding your voice when it matters most. Share this video with anyone who might be facing their own professional struggles, because sometimes knowing we are not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community where we support each other through life's most challenging moments. Remember that your voice matters, your work has value, and you deserve to be credited for your contributions. Never let anyone convince you otherwise.